Welcome everyone, good evening. And on this last webinar actually by the IIBA Brussels chapter, so the IIBA chapter that is responsible for the Belgian and Luxembourgish region for IIBA Global. And I'm really happy to announce this topic, which is, yes, as we've seen, I think lately, part of something that is of growing importance or gets more and more attention among the BA community. Resistance to change and employee performance. If you look up the BA book definition, then you will see that it is about change business analysis, about making change happen. And so in that sense, I'm really happy to see that this topic is one of the topics that we can offer our audience. I would also like to thank our sponsor, a long-time sponsor already, Quiazo Services. He's been dedicated to sponsor our activities, I think from the very beginning, which is great. So without that support, of course, it would be much more difficult to organize events. And so it's wonderful to be able to have this event also again sponsored by Quiazo Services. If you are interested in some more information about IT solution delivery, but with a very important aspect of business analysis around it, then be sure to look up Quiazo Services. And then I would like to introduce Agnesia Agrella. She is a business architect and a craniosacral therapist. Now I have to admit that I had to look up what craniosacral therapy actually means. So I'm reading aloud now from Wikipedia. It is a form of bodywork or alternative therapy that uses gentle touch to palpate, to touch the synarthrodial joints of the cranium. It is based on the fundamental misconceptions about the physiology of the human skull and is promoted as a cure-all for a variety of health conditions. Now, I'm not sure how well this covers what you as a craniosacral therapist do, but I'm sure you can explain us a little bit about it once you start your presentation. As a business architect, Agnesia facilitates cultural change and leads teams to face their biggest business obstacles, resistance to change and employee performance. You are interested in business processes, I've learned, and you have designed multiple operating models for different banks. So it's interesting to see how the business side and the hardcore or hard skill side and the soft skill sides combine in your work. I've also learned that you believe that each business is a system just as complex as the human body. When a human body works well, it's healthy. When a business system works well, it generates profits or it creates value for the organization. And so that's the kind of combination that you are trying to make, the power of the human body with a clear business focus to get organizations and employees achieve extraordinary results. You are also author of a book, Your Money is Your Business, which is available on Amazon. And you have told us that you will bring in quite some interactions. So it's best to make sure people have pen and paper ready to be able to participate in that interaction. So again, I'm really looking forward to this, and the floor is yours, Agnesia. You should be able to share your screen.
Thank you, Philip. Let me just screen two. And thank you so much for the opportunity and for the invitation to actually share a topic that's very close to my heart with the audience today. And Summertise is an innovation and creativity center supporting businesses to turn their creativity on demand. So I will share a little bit more about myself, but the products that what we offer is operating model design. We do whole brain leadership and company wellness measurement. We do monthly we do creativity on demand training, and then we do masterminds for entrepreneurs and family-owned businesses. But let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I get a lot of questions around my name, and because it sounds like Polish, But as you can hear from my accent, I'm actually South African. Currently, I live in London, and my mom just really liked my name from a book that she read. And the surname, my surname is actually Portuguese. So because my grandfather was from Madeira, which is that small little dot on the west coast of Africa, and he moved to South Africa when he was 17. As you can see, my family has actually moved quite a bit because I come from this dot down here in South Africa, moved all the way and is living in the UK at the moment. So it just happens that the founder of South Africa, which was Bartolomeu Dias in 1492, was also Portuguese. And so I grew up in a very small town in South Africa, and where my father worked on a gold mine. But I like to think that my change and my love for change really comes from my ancestors, the Portuguese, who are really good discoverers. So I really like to change, I like to move around, and I like to travel. So I have got a master's degree in leadership, and I have worked as a logistics manager for a paper manufacturer where I've implemented a new distribution strategy. And then I moved as a logistics manager to a bank where we've implemented the customer management systems for the first time. And that is when the bank started to change, and they actually centralized their customer records into a customer management system. And both those projects created a huge amount of change for people. And it was during these two projects that I really understood the stress that people go through and the fear of stress and the fear of not knowing what's going to happen to them. A lot of them had to change jobs. They had to skill themselves again. And quite a few of them actually left the organizations because the organizations changed too much. But I really love my job. I love solving problems, so I use a lot of technology. I've specialized in workflow and processes, and being a logistics manager, understanding how products move right from the raw materials to the end product is very similar to just moving data in the service industry. So it was fairly easily for me to turn from a manufacturing environment into a service environment because of the background and understanding how manufacturing works. But during that time, my mom was also very sick. And when she passed away, I started to look for ways of how I can help people to change easier so that there's not so much stress in their lives. And that is when I became a cranial psychotherapist. I moved to the UK to study cranial psychotherapy. And what we do is we work mostly with the nervous system. So we look at how the nervous system works, how the brain works, and how we actually react. And that is what I'm going to share with you today. Because that 4 years of training really opened my eyes to a whole new world. And for a period of time, I was really thinking that I actually create my own clients because of the stress that we put people under in the corporate world. But it took me some time to realize, but I can transfer those skills as well into my BA work. And that is when it became a lot more enjoyable for me to actually use the skills that I've learned as a therapist on how to hold space for somebody while their body unravels themselves and find a new way to adjust, to release the stress. I can do that as a BA as well. I can hold that space for people to understand how they actually add value to the organization. And so that journey really, and those studies put me onto a journey of discovery of the body. And so I have certified as a neurochange solutions consultant with Dr. Joe Dispenza. And so he does a lot of research with the body. He's a chiropractor, and he also does a lot of work with neuroscientists. They do a lot of work with the HeartMath Institute, which looks at how the brain and the heart work together and how we react under stress and what are the self-regulation tools that we can use to influence our own physiology and the people around us. I've also certified as a heart math coach, and I've also certified as a whole brain practitioner. And so the whole brain practitioner looks at, how do I use my whole brain? How does the left side of the brain work? How does the right brain of the brain works? And how can I actually look at a problem from a whole brain perspective? So I'm going to share with you those topics, and the reasons why I've chosen these specific scientists to work with is that they all measure and they all do research around the techniques that they offer and what is the impact on the people itself. So there is a lot of research that is going to be coming out next year, which will be published to actually show that there has been quite a lot of measurement and that the results are staggering of what is coming through into the from the scientific world at the moment. But this is a huge topic, and I really just want to concentrate today on why change is so difficult and how does that affect the performance of the people. So let's look at, why is change so difficult? When you step into a dark room, your body automatically adjusts to the conditions in your external environment. And this is a natural phenomenon. We don't have to think about it. Your body immediately dilates your eyes. It speeds up your heart rate. A lot of adrenaline is pushed into your body, and you prepare your arms and your legs to fight, flight, or freeze. So your body immediately starts evaluating your environment to see, where is the exit? Where's my escape? What is my route to the escape? How far am I from that escape route? How quickly can I get to that escape? And will I make it in time? And change is exactly the same. When I step into the dark, the change is also creating uncertainty, and I bring all the focus to myself. I want to see, where am I? How far am I from the exit? How can I move automatically into survival? So my environment becomes very important. My body becomes very important because I need to establish how far am I from the exit, and I need to determine how quickly can I get there. Companies are all the same on the components as well. So when we look at what happens in an organization, we all have the same components. And this is where you're going to need your pen and paper. So all organizations have a vision, a mission, and an objective. And that is the why of the organization. They all have customers. So that is the question of, who are you doing the organizations? Who are you doing it for? What are the operations? What are you providing to your customers? How are you providing it? Do you have people in your organization? How many staff do you have? Do you have a finance and accounting, IT, procurement? And when does your clients actually want their products? Now, although all organizations have all of these components, what makes them different from their competitors is how they do things. So now I want you, as you sit there and while you're listening to me, I want you to just take your attention to your chest. And I just want you to feel, what does it feel like when you breathe? How is your breath going in and out of your body? And then while you're listening to your breath, I want you to answer these questions for your organization. Why does your organization exist? Who are their customers? What are they performing? Are they doing a product or are they service orientated? How big is the organization? Now, I want you to imagine and just look at your answers. So the stakeholders that is in that organization, how do you think they will answer these type of questions? So if I have to ask them the same questions, will they have the same answers than you? Do you want them to have the same question or answers than you? So what makes us different from our competitors is how we do things. Is all our processes written down? Do we perform those processes regularly on the same consistent basis? Now let's look at the perspective from the people who's executing those processes and procedures. All people have the same body parts as well. We all have arms, we all have legs, we all have a torso, a brain, and various internal organs like your liver, your stomach, your heart. But what makes you different is how you use those body parts. And when you use all your experiences and all the knowledge that you have creates a pathway in your brain. And that is what makes you different. That is why you can actually take identical twins and they will be different, because the pathways that they've built on the experiences that they've had and the information that they have learned creates a different pathway in their brain. Now, to change, you have to create new pathways in your brain. And let's look at how that happens. Let's assume for a minute and go back to why I shared so much information about myself. Because I actually have pathways as strong as this photograph, the path in the photograph in my brain, because of my background, where I come from, the experiences I've had in my life, where I've traveled, what I've done. All of those experiences have got a pathway in my brain. All the people I've worked with. So for me to change, I have to start looking at creating different pathways. So let's assume I walk into your organization. I have been appointed and I'm coming onto your organization into a project that you are working. And I have been with your organization for 7 days. I have been through my induction and I now come and join your project. And we have our first project meeting. If I have to answer those questions that I asked you before about the organization, if I have to answer those questions now, how do you think I will answer? Will I have answers to all of those questions? How easy will it be for me to answer those questions? And how do you want me to answer those questions? Do you want me to have answers to all of the questions already? Or are you going to give me some time to work with it? Now, all the people in the organization who's been there before brings all the same type of pathways with them as well. So all their previous experiences and what they've gone through has obviously got pathways in their brain as well. And how strong those pathways are depends on how often and how regular they actually visit those pathways. If you want me to take a different direction and you want me to change, and let's assume I want, like in this photo, I want to change direction from moving on the path to the left. I want to go to the right and I want to go through that opening between the trees. If I do that on this path, I don't necessarily know what is on the right-hand side. I can see where I want to go. There's an opening in the trees and I know I need to go in that direction. But I really need to pay attention to what is under my feet. What is happening where I am right now? Are there holes in the ground? Are there stones and rocks, or is it easy to walk? So just like when I walk into your organization and you want me to do something different or learn something new, I'm also going to be uncomfortable and I'm going to be unsure of myself. To actually form that new pathway depends on how much information was provided to me during my induction, during the time with the team. How open are they to share the information? When they are really fearful and they see me as a threat, or if I come in and I want to change their life, they are going to feel just as intimidated and fearful as what I showed you with the environment of when you step into a dark room. Your body automatically starts thinking, what do I have to do? How am I going to do this? Will I have a job? Will I still be valuable to the organization? And during this time in COVID, we are all in some form of uncertainty. We have all gone into survival. How far we are on that level of survival just depends on our resilience and how quickly we can self-regulate. But to a certain extent, we have all been elevated in our stress levels. So automatically our bodies are in defense. We don't have to think about it. Most of the time it's unconscious. But how people react is the same as when they actually want to look at, how do I get around this? So when you start inviting them to come to your projects and they feel uncertain and unsure about, they will also go into survival and they will start thinking, their bodies will start thinking, where's my exit? How am I going to get out of this? So they would want to look at what are the timings. You bring your attention all to yourself because you need to know, how can I escape? Can I survive? And the minute we do that, we bring our attention to completely ourselves. And we call that sometimes being selfish, but it's actually just a natural instinct. We want to know, what do I look like? What do other people dress? How far are they from the boss's office? Who gets invited to meetings? Why am I not invited to the meeting? Can I do my job? Will I know how to do my job? So all those questions, when they start asking those questions, their body goes into that defense mechanism and they go into fight, flight, or freeze. And that is why it's so difficult for people to change. It's not that they're resisting the change. It's that their bodies needs time to adjust, just like in this photograph. So when I start walking on that pathway, I am uncomfortable. I am uncertain of myself. But if I do those things over and over and I walk on that path for a couple of days or weeks or months, you can see that the path on the left side is starting to fade. The grass is starting to grow there. The path to the right is starting to form. Now, change is exactly the same. You have to do the same things over and over for those new pathways to really be strong. And you have to unlearn what you've done before. So often we actually ask people to change and we don't change their procedures and their processes. If you don't change that and you leave that the same, they will always revert back. For anybody to change, they have to unlearn what they've done and build a new pathway. And doing it once is not enough. You actually have to do it over and over until your body has become comfortable and created new chemicals to feel like it's comfortable and safe. And that is where what I've learned in cranial sacral therapy is with compassion and understanding, having that with people who come into an environment where they're uncertain, you can relax their bodies. And the minute they start relaxing, they start engaging again and they're more open to change. You have to do things for a long period of time to really make that pathway strong. And as you can see, the pathway on the left never really goes away. Our brains are slightly different, that when you actually stop doing certain things, we prune away the connections. So our brains physically can break the connections that we had before. The only way you can do that is by stop thinking about the event and stop doing the actions that is related to that event. And that takes time. So for lasting change to happen, everybody in the organization needs to actually have new thinking, new behaviors, and new habits. So that is the big message I really wanted to bring over and make it easier for people to understand that I don't believe that there are resistance to change. There's just not understanding of how the body works and how we can make it easier for people. So Philippe, if I can please ask you to open the poll for us now. I'm going to show the audience a photograph, and there are 4 photos in the slide, the next slide, and there's 4 options. So there will be A, B, C, and D. And I want you to choose the photograph that represents your workspace the most. And then when Philippe opens the poll, I would like you to choose which one represents your space. And you just have to choose A, B, C, or D.
Yeah, people's votes are coming in.
And you just have to choose the one that actually represents your office the most.
So we have about 2/3 of the people have voted.
We'll give them a bit more time.
I can imagine people struggle between choosing their preferred office and their actual office space.
Yeah, I would like it to be your actual workspace. That will make a little bit more sense. We are going to go through it and I'll explain why it's important and how that relates to what I've been talking to up till now. It's just a fun way of introducing you to whole brain leadership.
I don't see the votes increasing anymore. Yes, we have 2 more. So we have about 42% of the people selecting office space A.
That's
then
42 for A.
Yes, then 25% for B.
Okay.
8% for C. And again, 25% for D.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everybody who voted. So I'm now going to share with you why this is important, and we're going to look at communication. So communication is very important because about 74% of all issues in the workplace is actually because of communication. So as you can see, we've got the biggest vote is actually for A, which is the top left. And we're going to look at how does these 4 different areas, or A, B, C, and D, what is their preference thinking? And that way, we're going to then hook that on to what is it, how does that relate to an organization? So let's look at, first of all, and for some reason, oh, there we go. Okay, so we're going to look at how does this relate into communication. And like I said, communication is very important of how we communicate. And when people are stressed, the easiest way you will pick up they're stressed are in the way they communicate. When people are very defensive, when they're either very defensive or they're very quiet. So we've mentioned fight, flight, or freeze. So what I have observed for people, your fight people are normally the ones who are quite keen with their opinions. So they are quite vocal and they verbal about their opinions. The people who flight and run away from a situation, they're the quiet people. They might wait for other people to talk first, and they will stand back a little bit, waiting for other people to give their opinion. And then we've got freeze, and those are your procrastinators, because they actually, when they go into defense, they freeze. So they literally cannot get themselves to move. So those are your extreme ways of communicating, and you can have a look next time you have workshops, see if you can spot it by using some of the information I'm going to provide you with now. So let's look at where on this 4 quadrants. So this 4 quadrants represent the 4 areas of the brain. So A, B, C, and D. And let's look at what is the characteristics of these areas. So the left-hand side is your more rational thinkers, and your right side is your more intuitive. Your B people normally ask the why. So those people want to know, why are we doing this? Then your D people, they always ask about who. They're very people orientated, and they want to know, who are we doing it for? What is the impact on the people? The what are your A people. So they want to know, what are we doing? And then your C people normally ask, how are we going to do it? Now, whole brain leadership means you have to ask all 4 questions to get a balanced perspective of the problem or the issue that you're trying to solve. And running an organization from those 4 questions will actually help you to create a profitable organization. It is important to have all 4 of these groups in a balance in your team. That doesn't mean you have to have the same number of people, but you have to balance them so that they all participate and they understand when are they the strongest and when should they be leading the project and when should they allow the people who are stronger in the areas that they are not, allow them to talk. Now, luckily, you guys all are BAs and you understand stakeholder management, and you understand when you have got a group or one person that is really dominant in the group, and it comes specifically from just one area, how difficult is it to manage the requirements and also that project? And why is that? Because your why people always are talking about the future. So they want to know, where are we going? So those are the people with a strategy. Your how people, they always talk about the past, how we have done it. The who people, for them, emotions gives them energy. They really want to understand how people work. They want to understand, and talking about the emotions and feelings really energize them. The what people, they don't like to talk about the emotions. They really get depleted when they have to start talking about the emotions. So this is really important because, as you can see, those questions also came up when we looked at what does an organization consist of. You can see how the people will normally, if they ask those questions and you don't provide them with the information, if they're prominently asking why and you don't provide them with a why, they will feel like they're not part of it. They will automatically feel threatened and they will feel uncomfortable. So if you understand where your people are and what is their preference way of communicating, if you provide them with that information, you can then reach them easier. When you reach them, you releases their physiology, you bring the threat in their bodies down, that you hold space for them because of that understanding. The minute your physiology drops, the minute that you feel safe, your body can actually relax and you engage your frontal lobe again. And the frontal lobe is the CEO of your body. That is where we make decisions. That is where we can actually see what's happening in the future. Now, unfortunately, when we're stressed, our body takes the blood away from our frontal lobe and it actually reduces our ability to make the decisions. So that is why sometimes people will act out of character when they're under stress. And the easiest way to bring them back and to let their bodies relax is to actually just make them feel safe. And you can do that through your communication. So the work that Dr. Joe Dispenza and the HeartMath organization also do is a lot about the coherence between your heart and your brain. So if you eat to coherence, your physiology relaxes as well. And we do that, the easiest way to do that is with understanding and compassion. And also asking questions is the way we engage our frontal lobe. So if we ask the right questions, we can actually relax the people's physiology. So as you can see, it is really important how everything fits together, because it's our pathways that really makes the difference. It's the people who drives the organization. And if you want to get your people to move in the right direction, you have to give them a very strong why, you have to give them a how, and you have to give them a what. If you can provide them with those questions, it will be easier for them to change. And so often I hear people, especially in big corporates, saying, if people don't want to change, just move them out of the way or move them sideways. For me, understanding how the body works, understanding where they are, and giving them time to build those neural pathways is what will help them to be at their top level of performance, where they can really understand how they can add value to the organization. And for me, I really ask this, if not you, then who is going to help them to change? And if not now, when? During COVID, I think we have seen so many people struggle with what's happened. And unfortunately, this change was done overnight, and it's on such a big scale because it's global. But I also believe that there at some level is some understanding for what stress do to people. And I think the importance of the softer skills are really coming to the fore. So thank you so much for your time. And if there are any questions, I'm quite happy to answer questions now. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you very much, Agnesia. There was one practical question maybe to start with. Sarah was asking which one in the slide with the 4 colored arrows in a circle, which one was Y? Did the numbers, the letters A, B, C, D match between the pictures and the slide with the arrows?
B was the letter B. So those are the people that ask why.
Yeah. So those are the people with a bit of with a not so cleaned up.
The photos. Yes, yeah. The photo is those are normally your unstructured people. So they are very creative. They are not the logical people. So that I will quickly go through the 4 areas. So the right one at the top, which was what we call R1. So those are normally your creators, very unstructured. Do not give them procedures. They do not follow procedures. They don't like procedures. The bottom right, those are your people. So they like to socialize. They're very empathy. They always are on the people side. They want to know what is the impact on the people. The left-hand side, which is your rational people. If you go to the top left, those are mostly your rational people. So they're very good with numbers. They're very precise. Those are your engineers, your accountants, your doctors. So they're very logical, very practical, and analytical. So bottom left are your people who are process orientated. So they want to know how we're doing things. What process do I have to follow? They're very good organizers, and they're very good at putting processes in place. If you want them to change, they are normally most difficult to change because they want to know, I've done it in the past, I can do it, I don't like to change.
Yeah.
So those 4 quadrants work normally, if you look at them diagonally, they complement each other very well.
Yeah. I am somewhere in the middle between the top left and the top right.
Okay.
So I couldn't really, I actually have two desks, one here at home and one in an office space that I'm using. And I know the one at home where I work most is cluttery. So that's definitely the top right. But the one in the office space, I try to keep as clean as possible. So I guess I kind of switch between a little bit. And yeah.
Yes, I think the top left and the bottom left looks very similar. The big thing difference is the color coding and very, structural organizers. So the bottom left is normally where everything is very well organized,
Yeah.
where the top left are minimalist. They don't like a lot of things around them.
Yeah. So Sarai also mentions that I think I also have both very logical. So it's the top left and also very people to people, very people oriented, which is the bottom right. Is it similar to some other ways of typing people, let's say, in the sense that you have a kind of base behavior that is your real behavior, but you have learned other behaviors as well, which is why some people tend to doubt between am I more this or that? Which one of is it? Which one of both is it? Or
yeah, so what we do at Whole Brain Leadership is we look at how people think. So this is really not based on your personality, but it is around your thinking preference. So it is how you think about things, and it is possible to change it. So if you actually want to learn a skill and you start doing the actions that actually will support that skill, you can change the way you think. So I've just given you one of the techniques just to illustrate the importance of those questions. We do have a lot of other measurements as well, but the important is that yes, it depends on how strong your pathways are. So when you've done things over and over, you will have a certain preference. If you have learned something over a period of time, you can change and it will change. There's also the base most probably will be there most of the time, but over time, if you really work on it, you can change it.
yeah, okay. There is a question from Christophe. Is tackling resistance to change towards leadership team members then towards employees? Any tips on dealing with leadership resistance? So let me see if I get the question right.
The way I think the way I understand that is we say everybody in the organization have to change. If you what we say change is you have to focus on what is the vision you want to create. So it's very important for any organization to have a very strong vision and very strong objectives. You then have to filter this, and this is where my architect's work comes in, is when you've got a strong vision, then you actually have to look at how does that filter through in your organization. But also, if you change that vision too often and too quickly, you will never embed change, because like I showed you, when you learn new things, you create new pathways. And if you want people to really embed change, you have to give them time to master that skill and to master those pathways. So that way, everybody in the organization really have to change if you want to change the culture. If people are under pressure or stress, they will always revert back to their strong pathway. So that photo that I showed with the two paths, if you put them under extreme stress, they will forget about the new and they will go to the old. It's much easier for the body. It's a lot less strain to just go back to what I know. And sometimes they will do that unconsciously. So as a BA, I normally like to actually sit next to people to understand and observe them of what they do. When you do things for a very long time, you become unconscious of what you're doing because it's in your unconscious mind. You've done it so many times, you don't have to think about it. And that's why sometimes we'll also sit in workshops and you think, well, why didn't you tell me you do that when we were in the workshop? Because they can't think about it. They've done it so many times, they don't even realize they're doing it. So the big problem with leaders normally is that they don't have to change. They always think it's only the people that needs to change. I think during COVID, maybe that has opened up a bit of that for some leaders. I don't say it will do it for all of them, but we all have had some form of change. But the biggest problem normally is to get those people to understand it's not just the people that needs to change. They have to change as well. And to actually work out how big is the change you want to make. So how much change do you want your people to do depends on how much time you have to give them to build the pathways.
Yeah, okay. A related question by Christophe. How can you raise awareness for change management to leadership? He sees that it's often the first thing to be cut from a project if there are budget constraints.
Yes, that's a very nice question and a very good question. Thank you for that question. I think the main thing that I normally do is I work with the bottom up and top down. So I work on both. So it is to understand what you can do as a BA to influence the people around you, and then to look at your budget constraints. If you have got the budget, then obviously that makes it easier. But most of the time, we don't have the time or the budget to bring these things in. So from that perspective, what I've done in the past is to work with them on a one-to-one basis. I find that if you want to try and do these things in a group, it makes them defensive because they're sitting in the group, and working one-on-one and giving them some information also to understand which part of the four areas that I've given you is most important to them, and then to lead with whatever is important for them. So say, for instance, they a top left person, which most leaders sometimes are, because they are the sort of the managers and the accountants. They want the bottom line. Lead with your numbers figures first, then you lead with all the others, but always look at it from all four perspectives. So you have to give them all four as well. So give them the why, the how, the what, and the who, all as a presentation, so that they can look at all of them together and understand the impact. But it's important to try and evaluate what is their preference thinking, and then lead with that question first.
Yeah, okay. Then there is another question by Elena. What will happen if you don't have all the types of ABCD people in your team?
Most people, and the combinations between those four is really vast, and it can be any combination. So sometimes you will have it that people can step up and they will have a sort of a second preference that they can step into. And some people can actually have more than one profile that they can play. The problem is that you might not get the right questions asked. So from that perspective, evaluating where you are and identifying the gaps, that is normally a good way to bring out what is the downfalls of your project, what are you going to lose, and that way, if you bring in people from other parts of the organization, that can sometimes help. If you don't have all four, you as the BA, if you understand those four questions, you can provoke those questions by the type of questions you ask. That way, they will sometimes realize that there's a gap on the project, and that will help you to get the resources that you want. So if you are aware of what questions you have to ask to highlight the gap, that will help you to maybe get the right resources. If you can't get that, then it is to look at who in your team can double up and ask those questions. And when you need them in your project, let them come to the front. You sometimes have to watch the people who are very quiet and your procrastinators and your freezers, because they won't come forward. So you will have to draw them out and really help them to step up and help them to overcome their fear to step up. But it helps to actually then empower people to take on roles which they sometimes don't know they can do.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. Elena says makes sense, thank you. And Christophe also has thanked you for your answer. There is also the practical question by Serai, I believe it was, where he can reach you or where people can reach you. Do you have a blog? You have a social media that
Yes.
you're actively using?
I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me on my website, summitize.com.
Okay, so those are good pointers. Thank you. I don't know if there are any further questions. We can still take one or two questions. I have a question actually while we are waiting for the chat. I can imagine that it's tempting to explain to people that this is why they feel reluctant to change. This is why change makes them feel, or when we ask them to change, makes them feel uncomfortable. Is that enough to get people on board that and giving them a bit of time? It sounds almost too simple.
I normally take them one-on-one. And I mean, I have worked with lots of people who was very resistant. I've also had people coming on a project who didn't really want to be there. And so the last large project that I worked on the last time, we did have one person who was allocated to the project because he was classified as a problem child, and people didn't know what to do with him. And I normally work with those people on a one-to-one. And I will explain to them how their bodies work, and I will explain to them why change is so difficult. And that helps them to understand themselves. It gives them confidence to understand there's nothing wrong with them, that it's okay. And you know, sometimes people don't even want to be on the project. Like, for instance, this specific individual did not agree with what we wanted to do. We didn't want to live in a digital world. He wanted to do it in the old way. And he actually said to me, you know, I prefer to do it my way. And I did ask him, well, why don't you leave? And he said to me, the pain is not bad enough yet. And so that happens. But that individual was one of our best resources when he actually were asked the right questions. He couldn't give us the solutions and the future, but when we asked the right questions, he could tell us what he would do in those situations. And he actually provided us with the information of what was the risks if we don't do certain things. So if you just understand what type of questions to ask, and working one-on-one takes away that defensiveness, because then they don't have to prove to other people that they don't know, or they know what they don't know. So people's biggest fear is they don't want to look stupid, they don't want to look like they don't know how to do their jobs, and they don't want to show they don't know. Because when you don't know in the corporate world, you are seen as a weak, and you don't know your job, and you're supposed to know everything. So people don't like to acknowledge that. But when you do that on a one-on-one and you actually explain to them, and obviously you have to choose your time when you do that. You don't do it when you know there's an issue. You wait until you go for a cup of tea or you go for a coffee. I now know it's a bit difficult during this times, but you know, you can have a Zoom call one-to-one, and that is where you start building that relationship with them. And I provide them with that information, but I always do it on a one-to-one.
Yeah. Okay, that's a very good practical tip. Sarah has started to follow you via LinkedIn, so that's wonderful. I invite other people to do so as well. We have had a few hand claps, great session, good feedback. I don't see any further questions coming in. So I'm going to...
I see one there, Philip. There's one which is an interesting one. How much time does change need to build the desired culture?
Okay. Yeah.
I'll take that one if you don't mind. It's
yeah,
a really
sure.
good question.
I overlooked it.
Yes, culture is becoming quite a buzzword at the moment. And the way we look at culture is you have to change the thinking and the behavior of people in the organization. And it depends on how big the change is. You know, if you're going to change a culture and it's a big organization, there's lots of people, it will take a bit longer. But what I like to do is to break it down and then empower the people to work on how do they see them fit into the results they want to create for the organization. That is where the creativity comes in. The minute you actually build some people up and you give them the confidence to see how their knowledge helps you to develop their organization, that is when their creativity kicks in. They know the organization well. They know they're part of the organization and their processes and procedures the best. If you allow them to tap into their frontal lobe, they will come up with solutions that nobody could have thought of before. And that is where cross-cultural teams comes in, is when you actually bring that creativity in. And there's different techniques that you can use to get people to work together. But first of all, you have to calm down their physiology. When they're too defensive, they cannot get into that creativity. But when you can get management to trust their people that they will come up with the right solution, it's easier to change the culture, because you just bring the people back into their own creativity to see how they can be in their jobs and make that job the best job that they want to work in. And that is where your performance change. That's where the creativity change. And that's when it's easier to change the culture. So that is where you then get people motivated to come into the work. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm a process person, but I'm starting to ask the question, have we not actually stifled creativity with too much process?
Yeah.
And I'll leave it with that question.
Yeah. And Abdul is thanking you for seeing his question, so thanks for catching that. Another question from Manoy: how best to navigate as an agile change agent during an organizational digital transformation?
I think, the stuff that I'm sharing with you now is so aligned with agile, because you are stepping into the unknown in an agile environment. The big thing with agile is that the management want to know that you're going to deliver what you said you're going to deliver. But you have to understand that you don't know how you're going to create it. When you come into that creativity with your team and they have got their frontal lobes on, you will get amazing, amazing solutions. Because when you start using their skills and their knowledge and their creativity, the solutions will flow. The best thing is to find the way of how do you make your people feel safe? How do you get management to trust that you can deliver it? And unfortunately, that is where you have to deliver. When you've said you're going to deliver on a certain date, does not necessarily mention that it doesn't have to be the best quality. You just have to put something on the table. And how we've done that before is by putting solutions on the table. So I worked for an organization where management couldn't make decisions and the project was taking too long. And we said, we want to take that task to the team and we will come up with the decisions. So the team was really apprehensive with that idea. But what we did is we said, okay, we're going to use those 4 questions. They didn't know that was what we were doing, but I was leading them to ask, to make sure we answer the problem from all 4 of those questions. And we came up with a minimum of 3 solutions every time, which management had to choose from. And that way, your agile methodology helps you then to improve your quality as you go through your iterations. But if you deliver on your time you said you will deliver, you will build your confidence from your management and your stakeholders. Your quality you can work on later. But if you actually always come up with 3 or 4 solutions, I would say 3 is fine, that people can choose from, you actually bring out the best of your team.
Okay, good advice. A few people again saying great webinar. Thank you very much. I actually have a small poll at the end prepared for people to give some very quick feedback. Shimit Zirim, I hope I pronounced that roughly correctly, enjoyed the seminar as well. As a consultant, it's usually a race against time to deliver within timelines. Knowing how to win over those who resist change becomes an invaluable skill. Absolutely. And yes, we will be sharing the slides and the recording afterwards. So let me thank you once again, Agnesia, for this interesting webinar, the last webinar for this year. But to answer Sarah's questions about future webinars, we have actually a few more things up our sleeve. And I'll quickly share my screen. So we have each week since the start of COVID our weekly online BA Cafe, which is just an informal chat between BAs. We talk about business analysis related stuff, but we talk about very different things as well. It's just an informal conversation. It takes place every Friday around lunchtime in Brussels, but everyone from around the globe is free to join, of course. We are taking a Christmas break on the 25th of December and the 1st of January, but so tomorrow we still have one more BA Cafe left for this year, and it is the Jingle Bells edition. So feel free to bring along your favorite Christmas decoration or hat or whatever you want. Then we are kicking off our 3rd edition of the BA Box study group in February, which is a study group limited to about 20 participants, where we go through the BA book together and people apply the different techniques on a project of their own choice. And we have the 4th already edition of the BA and Beyond conference, which is next March. And the call for speakers is now open. So people who are interested in sharing their own experience in some way with the BA community, feel free to submit your proposal at the ba-beyond.eu website. So those are 3 things coming up. We will also be having probably somewhere in February our 2nd BA community session. So keep an eye on our website or subscribe to our mailing list at our website to keep track on those activities.